Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before. This will be review number 5 from these guys if memory serves me correctly, but it's going to be my first beer from the dark end of the spectrum from them, so that should make this review quite interesting. But I've been impressed with the other beers that I've had from them so far, and fingers crossed this one carries on in the same vein. So for this one then we will head over to Öland, which is the southernmost of the two major islands off the Swedish east coast, the kind of long skinny one just over the water from Kalmar. Very beautiful place incidentally that I would recommend you check out. And we're going to go to a little place called Rälla on the island, which is on the kind of western side, maybe about halfway up. So we're going to have a look at another beer from Fireside Brewery. This one is called the Firestorm. It comes in at 9.5% ABV and they're describing this beer as an American Imperial Stout. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. This beer was actually recommended to me by the guys at the brewery because they were quite impressed with the other videos that I did, so they recommended that I take a look at this one. And I have to say I'm very curious about it. So the other beers that we've had from these guys so far, I had a little look before the video. It was the Carry the Torch, which was an IPA. Then we had the Fields of Fire, which was their Öland Strawberry Saison, which I really liked actually. That's a really nicely done beer. I bought that one on Öland, if I remember rightly. But then we had the Ember IPA, the Winter Blaze, and now we've got this one. If memory serves me correctly, this beer was released as part of the I want to say the December or the January. It's either December 2020 or January 2021 Lokalis Mosca leaked release. I honestly can't remember because I've got a bit of a stockpile of beers from both releases at the moment, but it was released in one of those, and basically this one is their Winter Stout release. But yeah, 9.5% Imperial Stout. This one, my first beer from them from the dark end of the spectrum, so as I said earlier, fingers crossed it is a good example of the style. But I have been impressed with these guys, and as I've told you before, you can find some real gems from the very small Swedish breweries, and these guys for me are putting out some really good stuff consistently. So check them out if you get the chance. You can order their beers nationwide through Systembolaget. But yeah, let's see how we get on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fireside Brewery before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list over the course of 2021. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Fireside Brewery then, on to my brewery notes. So Fireside Brewery are based, or Fireside Brewing I guess we should say, I actually can't remember, what does it say, is it Fireside Brewery or Fireside Brewing? It's Fireside Brewery it says, the Fireside Inn basically. But yeah, Fireside Brewery are based in Rälla, as I mentioned to you, on the western part of Öland, about halfway kind of up the island as I mentioned. But this is part of the Fireside Brewery is essentially part of an American barbecue restaurant and brew pub, and the company is owned by Joel and Johanna Heineke, and they started brewing way back in 2015. But their first brewery was a small 160 litre brew kit, and they found that the beer sold out, sold much better than they'd expected to, and it was just difficult for them to keep up, so they started scaling up. But in 2018, they started adding local ingredients into their beers, such as local honey and strawberries and stuff, to create the Öland series. The Fields of Fire beer that I mentioned for you a little while ago, that was part of the Öland series, and I do recommend that you check that out. I want to try their honey beer at some stage, but I haven't seen it for a wee while. But over 2019, they produced around 25,000 litres of beer. They expanded the brewery up once again, and they started selling their beers through Systembolaget as well. I think it was 2020 that their beers became available on the nationwide order system, if I remember rightly. So they got them into the local stores, and then they were able to expand a little bit beyond that as well. Unfortunately, recently they had to close their restaurant. I think a lot of people, like I did, I thought it was just a seasonal kind of summer thing, and I think they were struggling with the restaurant. So they've closed the restaurant from what I understand, and they are focusing on the on the brewery for the moment. But as of January 2021, they've produced 45 different kinds of beer. From what I gather, most of them are IPAs, but you've got a few random things in the Öland series as well, and then every so often you'll get an Imperial Stout like this. So yeah, as I say, I will keep an eye on what these guys are doing over 2021, and I'm sure you'll see a few more reviews from them, but this is my first one of the year. But like I said, I can't remember whether this beer was released in December 2020 or January 2021, I honestly can't remember. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Fireside Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, interesting little brewery this one, and as I say, do make sure you check out some of these small Swedish breweries, because you can find some very, very nice stuff from them. But yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. So yeah, you can see it is a nice kind of Firestorm there. All of their beers, of course, with the brewery being called Fireside Brewery, all of their names tend to be a little bit kind of fire themed, if you like, you know, Carry the Torch, Fields of Fire, Ember, Winter Blaze, you know, maybe they just like fire, but that's kind of a natural thing, to be honest. I think man has always been fascinated by fire since it was discovered by the prehistoric peoples. But yeah, it says on the side here, Firestorm American Imperial Stout. Firestorm has high bitterness balanced with rich malt flavours and aroma, notes of dark chocolate, coffee and noticeable dried fruit flavours. Apparently it's hopped with El Dorado, and I have to say that is not a hop that I would think to put in an Imperial Stout, actually. So that's going to be quite interesting. We'll need to comment on that a little bit. Plain black bottle cap on this one. So yeah, 9.5% ABV, best before the 12th of the 2nd, 12th of February 2023. 330ml bottle, this one. I couldn't tell you what I paid for this. I would guess that it's maybe around 45 or 50 Swedish kroners, but maybe a little bit higher than that, because you know, Imperial Stouts do cost a wee bit more. So yeah, to translate that, let's assume that it was 50 Swedish kroners, which seems a bit reasonable. So 50 Swedish kroners is roughly about €5, maybe about $5.50, $5.75 American. In pounds, that's going to be like, you know, £4.25 or something like that. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. My first dark beer from Fireside Brewery, which should be quite interesting. And you can smell some of the kind of fruity and boozy notes off this beer already. I think this one should make for a very interesting brew. So yeah, let's go for it and see how we do. That looks very, very nice. Yeah, just stick this back and there we go. So as you can see with this one then, the beer itself, as you would expect from an Imperial Stout, has poured a lovely, very dark ebony rosewood colour. If I put the light through this, you know, it doesn't even really have like a kind of Pepsi Max kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge to it, to be honest with you. You know, it's black as night. It's as black as you're going to get. But you could see when we poured this beer, it had about a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of medium tan head. You will find heads that are a bit darker than this, but that's fading away to be a very kind of thin foamy layer, and it's going to leave a nice sort of rich ring around the edge of the glass. But yeah, just a kind of thin, foamy, wispy layer sitting on top of the beer now. But I can tell you, just from the small whiffs that I've had, it does look really nice. There are one or two tiny little bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few very small ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But overall, it looks pretty nice, and this is pretty much what you would expect from an Imperial Stout. I'm curious just to see on the ingredients list, it is just barley malt that's in this one. So, you know, if you have a bit more wheat in your stout, then it is going to retain its head a little bit more, and this one I think will be quite an old school stout. If it's only barley malt that's in this, it will be quite old school. You know, it's quite popular to put oats and wheat and things in these beers these days, but I think this one might be a proper, just, you know, straight up old school Imperial Stout, and there's nothing wrong with that actually, definitely nothing wrong with that. But yeah, the colour of this one's absolutely lovely. It's what you'd expect. The colour of your beer, of course, is dependent on two things. In the first instance, the type of malt that you use, to the length of the boil. You know, a big Imperial Stout like this is probably going to have, we'll be able to tell when we try it of course, but you know, a big Imperial Stout should have a kind of 3, 4, maybe even 5 hour boil on it. The sugars caramelise more the longer you boil the wort, and thus you get a darker colour. But again, it's dependent on the the actual types of malt that you use in the first place. But yeah, it certainly looks the part, this one. Let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this beer. Yeah. That's very, very nice actually. It comes across as very clean and very smooth actually. It's got quite a bit of depth to it. I think this is going to be one of these ones, you know, it's got a very kind of straight shooting aroma in a lot of ways. You can smell like little elements of different stuff, but they all kind of like amalgamate into one thing, if that makes sense. So, for example, you can smell a little bit of the roasty, toasty black malt in this. It's a little bit bread crusty, but it's not overly dry and overly aggressive in some ways. It really comes across as quite smooth, to be quite honest with you. You can also smell a lot of brown sugar in this one, and it does come across as quite highly caramelised, you know, treacle molasses type thing. There's quite a bit of that coming out of this beer already. Yeah, I mean, it does go together really nicely. So yeah, like I say, toasty, well-fired, bread crusty backbone to this one. Maybe there's a bit of like Weirmann malt in here, a bit of Carafa of some description. But it actually comes across in the aroma as being like a very smooth and as if it's going to be a very kind of slick stout actually. So yeah, I mean, nice kind of toasty, bread crusty note. Big brown sugar qualities, but the brown sugar is quite interesting because, as I say, it's got that treacle molasses sort of thing. There's almost a wee kind of tiny touch of like bourbon or something like that with this beer, which is interesting. But you've also, I actually wonder if I was to smell this beer, I would maybe wonder if it was barrel aged. I've got a feeling I might think this was a barrel aged beer if I was to blind smell it. They need to get a barrel or two and try that with this one actually. Just going from the aroma, because I think this is going to be one of these stouts that's got quite a bit of depth to it. But yeah, it does have a wee bit of a kind of bourbony element to the brown sugars. There's a sweet caramel in there, a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of thing. Not too much biscuit though. The kind of lighter side of the brown sugars is more bourbony, kind of, which is quite interesting. I didn't expect that out of this beer, in fairness. There is an element of chocolate to it as well. I mean, you've got a nice kind of 50-60%. You've got a nice kind of 50-60% cocoa coming out of the beer, and yeah, yeah. So there is a nice kind of 50-60% cocoa chocolate coming out of this one. It's got, and that's good. I like it to have a bit of a more kind of milky element to it. There's one or two wee kind of vanilla elements mixing in with the chocolate there, but you've also got these darker, more kind of red fruity, kind of high cocoa chocolates in there as well. So it's quite well balanced in that sense. There's definitely one or two nutty elements to it. There's a little bit of a kind of woody vibe to the beer as well. You've kind of got everything you would want from a big Imperial Stout, to be honest with you. The malty side of this beer I think is going to be really interesting on the palate. It takes a little bit for the aroma to kind of open up, I think, so do take a wee bit of time and just ponder it over before you actually get stuck into the beer. So yeah, the kind of the malty side of this beer is very, very nice. On the hoppy side of things, the hops don't come out all that much on it, to be honest. You do get a nice little bit of it. There's a wee touch of earthiness there, a little bit of a kind of slightly smooth herbal kind of thing. You do get a wee touch of floral aromaticity and a bit of grassiness at the front of the nose, but the green component in this, the green component of the hops in this beer is actually quite, it's quite reserved, to be honest with you, and I didn't expect that out of it. I'll be curious to see, because I do wonder, maybe they've done late edition hops in the stout, because I would think, you know, it might just be the fact that it's Eldorado hops. As I say, I've never encountered that hop used in a stout before. It might well just be how the Eldorado hop behaves, but the green component of the hops in this beer is remarkably kind of reserved, which I would not have expected. On the fruity side of things then, you get, well, in fairness, you do get a wee touch. The more you smell of this beer, you do get a bit more of the earthiness and the kind of bread crust. But on the fruity side of things, there's quite a little bit of a red fruity character to this one, and it's actually quite a bright red fruity character. It's not your typical kind of plum raisiny sort of thing. I can't really place what it is. It's almost like a very bright fig, but with a little bit of like a, you know, like a red currant or something. And there is a wee bit of like a blackberry sort of thing. So there is something just a little bit lighter and juicier, almost maybe a wee bit like cranberry or something like that. But you know, as I've said to you, Simcoe is I've seen Simcoe. Simcoe's quite a popular hop to use in black IPAs and stuff. But you know, I would say Eldorado has that kind of same passion fruity note, although it's a wee bit more complex. I've always found Simcoe's very straight shooting, but Eldorado's a lovely hop as well. But it's just got a wee bit more kind of complexity to it than Simcoe does. So I maybe wonder if that's the kind of logic behind this one is maybe they've thought, you know, Simcoe works well in these dark beers, Eldorado might as well. Do let me know about that. If some of you are more knowledgeable on Eldorado in darker beers, let me know your own thoughts on that in the comments section below. That's quite an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, take a bit of time and ponder over the aroma. Like I said, it's kind of got everything you would want of an Imperial Stout, and you know, it takes a wee while to get the aromas out of it. But let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. This one is the Firestorm, an American Imperial Stout as they're calling it, coming in at 9.5% ABV from the Fireside Brewery in Rälla on Öland off the southeast coast of Sweden. Beautiful part of the world. Do make sure you go and check out Kalmar and get across to Öland and just have a drive around the island. Lovely, lovely place. Slanja, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, right. First off, this is a beer that's all about the aftertaste. I mean, when you first take it in, when I took it in there, I was like, right, okay, you know, come on, what's going on here? But then in the aftertaste, yeah, that's when you get the real flavour out of this one. This is one of these stouts that's all about the aftertaste. Because I was a bit worried there for a minute. I will say that I was a wee bit worried when I had it there. I was like, oh no, please, please, don't just taste of nothing. But then this beer, when you take the beer itself in, it's quite oily, and it just feels like, a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of dry bread or something like that. But then when it starts to show its drier qualities, that's when you get the flavour out of this beer. Absolutely. This one is it's another solid beer from these guys. Absolutely. Yeah, I do like this. It's very smooth as well. It's a very kind of smooth and slick Imperial Stout. That's the other first impression that I have of this one. Yeah. Yeah, I think you do get, when you've actually got the liquid on your tongue, you do get more out of it. The more that you drink of it. It's interesting. This is definitely a beer that evolves on the palate a little bit, so bear with it. So yeah, where to start with this one then? Where to start with it? But I'm going to say straight away, this is worth trying actually, and again it backs up my statement that I've said that it's definitely worth trying these beers from the very small Swedish breweries. Yeah, so straight away with this beer, you can feel a little bit of that kind of nice, toasty, roasty, sort of black malty quality in there. I've got a feeling it might be Special B that's in this one, because it's not quite harsh enough to be like a straight up black malt, it's not quite dry enough to be like that, and it's not quite soft enough to be like Carafa, to be honest with you. So I want to say that it's somewhere in the middle. It might be Special B and a combination of Carafa, come to think of it, because yeah, the further you go into the aftertaste, it does smoothen out a little bit. But yeah, the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate, it's blanketed with that kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crusty sort of thing. That is the backbone of this beer, 100%. And then on top of that, let's focus on the middle third of the palate for the moment, but on top of that you start to get that soft kind of brown bready quality. I wouldn't say that it's kind of sweet enough to be like a rye bread, it's more like a kind of wholemeal bread that sits on top of that, and you will just gradually feel the middle of your palate getting slightly drier the further that you go into the aftertaste with this one. But if you go to the front corners of your palate and then diagonally back, underneath that you will start to pick up a few kind of woody qualities to the beer. Likewise, if you go to the very centre of your palate and just kind of follow the middle line of your tongue forward, you will pick out one or two little nutty elements. But I would say the woody notes are a little bit more prominent than the nutty things. The nutty things are very, very subtle actually. But yeah, that's your backbone of the beer. It's well-fired bread crust, then a kind of lighter wholemealy brown bread sort of thing sitting on top of that. But then you start to get the other layers kind of sitting in there too. Yeah. Sitting in the middle third of your palate, then you've got a nice kind of, it's almost like you've got a circle in the middle of your tongue, right? So you've got a nice layer of kind of chocolate there, and it's quite a smooth chocolate. It's got a wee bit of dryness to it, you know, as if kind of one side of it's like slightly charred or something. And it's kind of interesting because as you move further forward on that sort of chocolatey base circle that you have, it comes across as a little bit more kind of milky, you know, 40-50% cocoa at the front, but then further back it's definitely more like kind of 60-70% cocoa. So you can see the difference, the degree of difference there, a bit of milky chocolate at the front, a bit of darker chocolate towards the back. But then on top of that, in the very centre of your palate, you've got the kind of brown sugars in this one. And in fairness, there is a small element of that kind of almost like bourbony, you know, that sort of infused bourbon sort of flavour that you get out of this one. You know, could they have used a little bit of a wood chip? Did they put one or two little wood chips in this beer or something like that when they were brewing it? That would seem an obvious answer, actually, to put a little bit, you know, that they've put a little bit of wood chip in this, because there's quite the woody undertones to this beer are quite noticeable, and then you've also got a wee bit of that kind of slightly bourbony, brown sugary kind of thing. So that's an interesting point to make about this beer for sure. So the brown sugary layer, it's almost like the bit that sits on top of the chocolate, it's almost got a little bit of that kind of woody, bourbony sort of brown sugar to it. But then in the very middle of your palate, you've got a slightly more treacly kind of thing, and there is a bit of sweetness to it. So you're kind of building up like a mountain in the middle of your tongue almost, and then sitting on top of everything else, you can feel there's more brown sugar there as you kind of go away, and those brown sugars just cover everything else and move out towards the edges of the palate. So when you're more close to the kind of centre of your tongue, which is the boozy epicentre if you like, as you go further out you get more caramel, and then as you reach the edges of your palate, that's when you get a more kind of biscuity, McVitie's digestive sort of thing. So this beer is quite layered, and it's almost like the flavours kind of stack up right in the middle of the palate. That's just the middle third of your tongue. But yeah, if we go back down to the base layer then, I mean, move back and you've got that border region between middle third and back third of your palate. There's a little bit of a more intense kind of well-fired bread crusty note there on the border region. In the back third of your palate, you've definitely got a more kind of roasty, toasty, grainy, brown bready base. You can feel that the breadiness does sort of thicken up a little bit on that sort of back third of your palate there. I think it's I think it really does kind of just thicken up there a little bit, but at the same time it has a bit of smoothness on top. So if you start at the very back of your palate, nice kind of toasty black malty note, but going further forward from that, you can feel the nice bready notes there, and as you reach that border region, the kind of thickness just drops away a little bit, and then as you as it drops away a little bit, you get the more kind of how would you say, you do get a little bit more, the thickness just drops away, and then you're into that kind of more complex layer in the middle third of your palate actually. I have to admit, I would disagree that there's kind of coffee elements to this beer. And the main reason is I think coffee beans come across as like really, really smooth. I don't think, for me this is all about the malt. This is more of a kind of sort of bready imperial stout if you like. It's just not quite, it doesn't feel, it's not that it's not thick enough, but there's just something. For me, if you're going to say it has like coffee flavours, there's just something I expect from the mouthfeel in it, and it doesn't quite have that for me, because the coffee beans have got that sort of fibrousy kind of thing to them. Tonka beans as well, you'll find it with, beans for me are just quite fibrousy, and you don't get that with this beer. This is distinctly kind of bready, if you like. It just doesn't have that sort of fibrousy kind of thing that you'll get from beans to it. So yeah, some of the flavours are quite similar, but I wouldn't use coffee as a descriptor for this one. It's like well-fired bread crust, I would say. But this is me being picky, of course. But I think that covers the kind of malty side of this beer pretty extensively, to be honest with you. Let's focus on the hoppy side. So in the back corners of the palate, there's definitely a wee bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, you can detect a little bit of herbal quality, and then the earthiness actually spreads quite far forward in this one, but as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more sort of floral. Then round the front curve of the palate, it's more kind of grassy, and then it's got a wee bit of more of a, there is a little bit of an almost, there's a very slight zestiness, very kind of grassy type quality to the to this type of flavour that you get in this one. So I like how this goes together. I do like how it pieces itself together. So yeah, I like how this one goes together in that sense as well. The green component of the beer, it's a bit more prominent than the aroma would have you believe. But I still find the kind of green component of this beer a little bit reserved. But bear in mind, I think I could have had this since the 1st of December, and we're a rough, well, 7th or 8th, because it would have been delivered around then. I think I might have had this beer since the start of December, but it's I'm now reviewing this one for you on the 8th of February actually. So yeah, I've had this beer a little bit, but you know, as you age this one a little bit longer, the hops are going to drop away further and further. Don't know, does it say when it was bottled? It says best before the 12th of the 2nd, 2023. So I don't know, maybe was this bottled further back and they've had it aged in the brewery a little bit more? That would certainly make sense, because as I say, the green component of the hops is not overly prominent. It's definitely bottle conditioned as well, because you can see there is a fair wee bit of sediment in it too. But yeah, the kind of malty component to this beer and the hoppy side of it go together quite well, but there is a good wee bit of grassiness there. But as I always say, on that front third of your palate, that's where you get the nice oily bubble, where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And I will say with this one, underneath that there is a wee bit of the bread crusty, kind of brown bready sort of thing. So at the back of that front third of your tongue, at the back of that front third of your tongue, there's a little bit of it's, well, to be fair, the whole fruity side of this beer is quite interesting, because it's quite oily and it's quite red fruity. I don't get like I don't get such a strong plummy and raisiny kind of note out of this one, and I would say that the front third of your palate is a little bit dry actually. But yeah, for me, there's a bit of fig to this one. There's a bit of a kind of blackcurranty type quality, and there's a little bit of black. There is a wee bit of a more oily blackberry evolves out of this one the further you go into the aftertaste, but there is almost just a wee element of something slightly brighter, you know, a little bit of cranberry. I was saying there's a wee bit of cranberry or red berry or something in the very centre of that front third of your palate. You can feel that there. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and front third of your palate, there's a bit of a very dry, well-fired bread crusty note there. But yeah, it's nice how it's nice how that goes together. The fruity component of this beer is quite different, and I would say that the difference between this one would be it feels a little bit more like red curranty, almost very slightly cranberry. Then you've got the black currants and the more oily blackberry note coming out of this beer. The further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, this is a solid Imperial Stout actually. And I would say I think the trademarks of this brewery are almost in the mouthfeel, so I think this is a good point to kind of move to the mouthfeel and round off the review. For me, all of these beers that you find from Fireside Brewery are very smooth, and they've got a little bit of kind of slickness to them. I think that's how I would describe these beers, and that carries over into this one as well actually. So it's quite nice in the sense that, you know, if I drank these beers regularly enough, I'm pretty sure I would recognise the brewery that it's from, you know, like I can do with, you know, Williams Brothers back home in Scotland, because I had, you know, so many of their beers over the years. But, you know, the memory that I always have of Fireside Brewery is their beers are always really solid, but they've got this smoothness and kind of slight oiliness to them and slickness. That's what I always remember about Fireside Brewery, and you've got that in this beer. So in terms of giving it our usual description, I would say this one, it's kind of top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full body. This isn't the thickest Imperial Stout that you're going to come across, but remember these days they're using wheat and oats and everything to thicken up these beers. And it's only 9.5% as well. I say only, but you know, it's not the heaviest alcohol, the heaviest alcoholic Imperial Stout you're going to come across. But yeah, it's got a real, and it is old school as I say, so it's a more slick Imperial Stout. This one, I think it probably fits into the category of an RIS, a Russian Imperial Stout. But yeah, carbonation's very smooth. Overall I would describe this beer as being, you know, quite silky and smooth in a lot of ways. The IBUs, it tells you on the bottle that it's 80. I don't know if I would pick that out. I maybe would have thought it was, you know, the IBUs, picking out the IBUs is my weakest part of beer reviewing, because, you know, I think I'm probably a lot better at it with IPAs than I am with Imperial Stouts, in fairness. But 80 IBUs, I can see that, because the beer does have a good bit of dryness, particularly in the back of the palate, and that evolves out of it the more you drink of it. But yeah, the beer's got a real smoothness to it. The malt base, like I say, toastiness, smoothness, and then a bit of the kind of sweetness on top. It's not such a sweet stout, this one, though it is more kind of old school Russian Imperial Stout. Like I say, there's a nice kind of slick and sort of oily, fruity character to this one, and then you've got just a bit of the hoppy bitterness as well. Quite a bit of the bitterness is coming from the malty part of the beer, though, I would say that. But yeah, this is it's another really solid beer from Fireside Brewery, and I'd be curious to try. I don't know how much they experiment with Imperial Stouts, but it would be interesting to see them do, like a sweeter Imperial Stout. I think these guys, I'd love to see them do, on the basis of this one, I think an oatmeal stout, like an oatmeal Imperial Stout, could be a very interesting thing from them, because this, when you think about it, these guys, as I say, are known for their smooth mouthfeel. An oatmeal Imperial Stout would be an interesting thing for these guys, like an old school English oatmeal stout. I think could be a very interesting experiment for them to have a go at. I'd love to see, a Scotch ale. Obviously, I want everybody to brew Scotch ales. It'd be cool to try a Scotch ale from these guys at some stage too. But yeah, it's a really nice beer, this one. It is a very, very nice beer. Quite an old school stout, this, but it's a nice addition, and it's nice to have something a bit different. But obviously, this brewery probably are better known for their IPAs, I would say that, but to have a kind of winter warmer Imperial Stout such as this is never a bad thing. So yeah, thumbs up to them for this. I've enjoyed this beer. It's a change of pace from the brewery, and I think it fits in. It's another solid beer from them. And that's what these guys are doing. It shows you the strength of the Swedish beer scene. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one then. This one was the Firestorm, a 9.5% Imperial Stout, from the Fireside Brewery in Rälla on Öland, just in the kind of southeastern part of Sweden. Really nicely executed, and that's what I've come to expect from this brewery. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Check out my social media, check out all the Firestorm Brewery stuff, their Facebook, Instagram, website, all of that kind of thing. If you want a nice solid kind of Russian Imperial type stout, this one will certainly fit the bill, and it's nice to try something from the dark end of the spectrum from these guys. But they also do solid IPAs, so keep an eye out for what these guys are releasing through the Lokalt or Smuskeligt. But yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. The Firestorm Imperial Stout, 9.5% ABV from Fireside Brewery in Rälla on Öland here in Sweden. Slanja, skål, cheers.